Hey everyone, welcome to our virtual event on collective wisdom, the power of questions and creating shared ownership. I'm super excited for this one. I get to talk to one of my favorite people that I work with, Christina Courson. She's from Lockhart ISD down in Texas. Just a little bit about Christina. Christina is the Executive Director of Communications and Community Services. I remember the first time I met Christina in person was at an event in Austin, Texas. We were supposed to go for a quick coffee after the event, and we ended up sitting for a 3-hour chat. She introduced me to Simon Sinek and got into Start With Why. And we talked about how important it was for leaders to gather more information and so that they could make better decisions by asking better questions. It was a wonderful discussion with her. And then after that, I was fortunate enough to do a trip down to Lockhart, and she took me to the best barbecue in Texas. And just watching her in her community as she spread goodwill, and everywhere we went, she said hello to everyone. She had built this whole thing around Lockhart, and the whole community was coming together around the school. The local businesses were supporting them. Everyone, it was just a wonderful thing to see as she's built this over time. So I thought she's a perfect person to bring into today's conversation. She focuses a lot on asking good questions to get that better feedback, and she's got lots of great insights that she can share with us today. For those of you joining us for the first time, the conversation is going to be around 20 minutes, and then it's going to be followed by a thought exchange. And then that's where you can share some questions or thoughts for Christina. And then we'll use the remainder of our time then to go through as many questions as we can. We would love you to join the conversation on social media using the following hashtags: #TE virtual events, #TEVE. And without further ado, I would like to start the conversation with Christina here. And one of the things that I would love to learn about first, Christina, is why are questions so important, and from your perspective?
Thank you, Colin. What I will tell you is that in Lockhart ISD, we believe as leaders that it is so important for us to engage the people we serve so that we can learn more. What we know is that when we learn more and we have more information, we can make better decisions. And that is our philosophy. That's the way that we do business in Lockhart. We abandoned that model that somehow leaders were supposed to know all the answers, and embrace the model that as leaders, we're not trying to be continuous experts. We readily admit that we're not continuous experts, but as leaders, we should be continuous learners. And when we are continuous learners and we're working to understand the priorities and the needs from the people we serve, we make better decisions. I think one of the best ways to think about it is this. I mean, all of us know about pictures, right? We all have smartphones. We all take pictures. We're posting on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. We're doing all of these things. Images are so important. What is more frustrating than a pixelated image, right? Like you look at a pixelated image and it's fuzzy and you don't see the details. Worse yet, if you go to a presentation and somebody's got a photo up and you can actually see the little boxes, it's not very helpful. So as leaders, I mean, certainly we don't have all the answers, but of course we have some level of expertise to have earned the position of being a leader. So I feel like what we start out with is kind of like a pixelated picture. We have a concept, we have an idea, right? But there's still some things missing. And so when we embrace the mindset of going to the people we serve and asking meaningful questions, questions that invite perspective and expertise, diverse points of view, imagine if every single one of those people was able to offer color and dimension and detail and specificity. When we ask questions and we learn more, as leaders, we no longer have to settle for a pixelated image because the people we serve fill in all of those gaps, fill in all of the fuzzy, fill in with the detail and the color that we need to have truly an ultra HD picture of the issue at hand.
I love that analogy, Christina. And I think like one of my experiences with working with lots of districts as well, and just getting that clearer picture is the people participating and that you're asking those questions from as well. They get that sense of like what we're talking today, like shared ownership, and I've heard you coin this phrase that I thought was a wonderful way of putting it as well, is that they get to share in the successes of those decisions that you make. And just a little bit about that, how have you, when you talk to the people that you've asked those questions and you've got their feedback, how have they responded to this way of leading?
So if you look at this kind of traditional concept of leadership, that somehow leaders are supposed to have all the answers and direct, right? Well, that makes the people we serve, that puts them in a very passive role, right? And when we start instead understanding that they have expertise and have a detailed understanding at levels that we don't have, because they're experts in their experience every single day, when we allow them to have that opportunity to share with us what's important, or what needs immediate attention, what needs to be prioritized, that blind spot, if you will. You know, you can't just rely on your mirror, right? When you're driving, you got to look, you know, over your shoulder. You need to really use your sight. And so we're using our collective sight, right, to make sure that we don't have a blind spot. And when everybody gets a chance to weigh in, they're no longer passive, they're active. They're actively owning the progress of an organization. Sometimes leaders have to make decisions that not everyone is happy with. But the fact is that if everyone has a chance to be heard, to be seen, to be involved, they might not always agree with the final decision, but they'll always feel good that you care to ask. I mean, people will forget what you say, but they will never forget how you made them feel. And as leaders, we need to tune into that.
I love that. And I do love that you use the car analogy there as well, because I was fortunate enough to see a video of you teaching your daughter how to drive. And for anybody that has Facebook, it's one of the most wonderful things to watch. It's like, and even in that, like I see your leadership skills, like as you got to the end of the session, you kind of asked her questions to lead her through the experience, and not said, you should have put it into park, you should have done this. Even when you were flustered, you still were like, okay, so why do we need to do that? And I think that's from the best leaders that I've met in my life, that's the wonderful thing that they do. They kind of guide you through those questions. Like you go there looking for an answer, but they actually ask you more questions about yourself, but then set you on a direction where you can be like, and then you get to the answer, but it's with your own way. And that, it just feels more meaningful. It feels like I own my decision of where I'm moving forward. And I've had some opportunity to guide that in the way that I wanted to. And so that kind of leads on to, what would you recommend? Like, what are some great questions to ask? Like as a leader, what are your kind of questions that really help you get to that?
When you think about the why behind asking questions, remember the reason why we're doing it is so we can learn more. And I think some of the best questions are those that really allow feedback to happen organically. And so for that reason, I think the less we try to control what we think the feedback should look like, or what we think the feedback will look like, you know, if we're willing to let go of that control and use open-ended questions, I think that what that does is it just really opens the door widely for amazing feedback. When we ask questions like, do you think? And it's answered with a yes or a no, that doesn't really provide you a quality, ultra HD understanding of an issue. All it does is it provides you a snapshot of whether somebody agrees or disagrees with a thought that you put out. That's not asking for their feedback. It's asking for their feedback about what you think. And as leaders, we need to release that agenda. I know it's kind of scary when you think you know an answer to something, but when you ask an open-ended question, for example, what are the ways in which we can improve staff morale at Lockhart ISD? It's a very open question. It invites feedback that could be from any direction and could be any idea. Like, could you imagine if I said, which of the following things would boost staff morale? A, more jeans days. B, a 2% raise. 3, a snow cone machine outside. I mean, could you imagine if those were the only answers that they had to pick from? How much I've limited their ability to tell me what they really think is important. I could pat myself on the back and say, well, I asked. And I could implement what I think is right, but I'm only implementing what I think is right based on the limited options I've provided them. Why limit our people? We should not limit our people. We should instead use open-ended questions and just let the feedback come.
I love that. And like from a participant in that kind of experience, that feels wonderful for me, because I can share what's really, that it's a forefront of my mind. But as a leader, how's that vulnerability piece? Like, what's it like when you open it up to be that open? So it's that open-ended, and you know, like, for instance, when you go out to staff, you have to be prepared that you might have asked that question in a certain hope of what you would get back, but you never know what you're going to get back. So could you give some advice for people who would like to follow this way of leading, but maybe have some apprehension over that vulnerability piece of, like, yeah, I'm going to open this whole thing up and people are going to tell me what they're thinking?
Sure. I think before I answer that more directly, just a little bit of context. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the work of Dr. Carol Dweck, and she talks about, she's done TED Talks about the power of yet, and she's written books about mindset, and she talks about growth mindset, and that the people that are successful are most successful are those that have a growth mindset, those that accept that failing is part of a learning process, and that it gets you closer to a better understanding of a potential solution or achievement, that it's okay not to know all the answers. What's important is to keep striving to find those answers. And when we can embrace this growth mindset that we are all continuous learners, as leaders, we should be continuous learners. We are, the day that we think we're an expert and that we're done learning, we should not be in leadership, because it's a responsibility to be a continuous learner, to be open, and to embrace that growth mindset that we're a work in progress. We're continuously trying to improve. It's not an either or. It's not I know all the answers or I don't know all the answers. It's I know some, but I could learn more. And I might stumble along the way, but as long as I'm moving forward and as long as I keep trying and asking for help and asking for guidance and learning, then I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So when we embrace this, it removes that pressure for us to be perfect. It removes that pressure for us to have the right answer every time. It prevents us from getting paralyzed with fear, and it propels us to progress. That's the difference in the mindset. So I think that when we're able to shift our mindset to that, then it makes us far more comfortable with being vulnerable. It makes us far more comfortable with readily admitting to the people we serve that we don't have all the answers and we really need them. And honestly, I mean, if we're not doing that, then how can we advocate for them? How can we advocate for what's best for them? How can we be advocates for our mission if we don't realize that it takes all of us, that collectively we have more power together? That's just the way I look at it.
I do. I love that. And it's like I said, from watching, like I'm fortunate to work in a company that has that type of leadership as well. And it is very empowering as an employee to be able to share your feelings in that way. And I can imagine in your district as well, it's really empowering for the community members to tell you what they're thinking so that you can make decisions, or your staff. And it's, I do love like how you got there and the kind of resources that you've worked along the way to open yourself up to that continuous learning. And one thing that, just as we move on a little further, I would love to see or have you talk a little bit about some of those successful examples you've used at Lockhart ISD in this approach? Like, I know that you've gone out in a few different areas. You've gone out to your staff, you've gone out to your community. Yeah, just pick one of those that you'd like to talk about that really illustrate that power of that open-endedness of the question, and then also the collective wisdom of the group.
For sure. The example that comes to mind immediately is on the topic of school safety. Lockhart Independent School District, the #1 priority is the safety of our students and staff. How can we best ensure that? At a time when we've seen so many tragedies nationally with violence in schools, what can we do to be better prepared to take care of our people and our students and to protect them? And so a number of districts, I mean, not just in Texas, but across the nation, we began to examine, what we could possibly do. I think we were all asking that question, but the way we were asking that question was very different. Many of them were doing surveys, and some of them were doing forums, some town halls, some people were having task force meetings. I mean, everybody was looking for an answer, right? And at that time, there was a lot in the media about hardening schools and using metal detectors, arming teachers. I mean, there was just a lot in the media that you would think was really representative of what people were thinking. When we got to that topic of school safety, our superintendent saw an opportunity for us to use a tool that could help us ask people broadly what they thought was important about school safety. Superintendent Marcus Strada, contacted me when he learned about a tool called Thoughtexchange and said, we got to look at this. I think this might be a great way for us to get community feedback on this very important issue. And he was right. We used the tool to ask an open-ended question. What are the things that the school district should consider in keeping our students and staff safe? When we put that question out there, I mean, we thought we might know what would come back, but we were surprised by the results because the results weren't really anything that we expected to hear. I mean, for example, of all the things that were, when we asked all staff and all parents to put this in perspective, we asked them what they thought, and the #1 thing, the top 4 things actually had to do with fencing around elementary playgrounds. Fencing around elementary playgrounds. And after that, it was social emotional concerns. How can we support the social emotional development of our children? We need social emotional counselors. These are just a couple of tidbits, but they were the top of the list. And that list did not mirror anything that we saw in the media. That list didn't mirror anything we saw in editorials. It was our list. It was the list of the people that we serve. If we had just gone with what everybody else was doing or talking about, we would have really missed the opportunity to do what was meaningful for the people we serve. And so our leadership team is using that feedback to help us prioritize our resources for school safety. And you know what? It involves fencing around elementary playgrounds. And just in the past week, we posted a new position for a social emotional counselor that's going to serve our school district, our students, and to train our staff. How wonderful that we could turn to our community and to find out exactly what was important to them and to prioritize our resources to directly support that.
I love that so much, Christina. And then it just ties so well to the shared ownership and also the sharing the successes. It's like, that's the collective wisdom of your community, what's more important to Lockhart, and then to get that feedback and actually make those decisions and put them into action. It's a wonderful thing to do. We're getting a little bit close to time now on the just for a conversation, but one thing I'd love to ask you, because just as a takeaway for people that have attended today is, and I'm stealing this from a podcast, which I feel like me and you could do for like 3 hours, because I always feel like I could chat to you forever, is what are 2 or 3 books that you would recommend that kind of align themselves to this conversation?
There's a book by Carol Dweck called Mindset. And I think that is really powerful, not just for leaders. I just think it should be something that everyone reads. It talks about how having a fixed mindset can limit you, and it really lays the argument and example after example of how having a growth mindset can benefit you at work, in personal relationships, in sports. I mean, in any situation, any organization would benefit from a study of that book. Another one I would recommend is Leading with Questions. As a matter of fact, I have it here in case in case you wanted to. Leading with Questions by Dr. Michael Marquardt. This book has been tremendously helpful to me as a leader, and it's really challenged me to think about how to approach the community we serve when we're trying to make important decisions.
That's awesome. That's perfect. And I think that's a good time to jump into an exchange. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm hoping everyone can see a QR code. Let me just see. And so if you've got an iPhone, you can just take out your camera and zoom into the QR code, and that'll get you into the exchange. If you're on an Android, you'll most likely need a QR reader. Amelia is also going to post the link into the chat, I believe. Let me just check. Yep, there it is there. So if you guys could jump in and share some thoughts or questions that you have for Christina, and then ideally we'd love you to rate or star at least 10 to 20 thoughts would be great. I'm going to stop talking for a bit and give you some time to just be creative and think of sharing a couple of thoughts. And as we do that, then I'll load up our thought graph to show you how the thoughts are interacting. So we still have a few thoughts coming in. We'll leave another minute or two to share whatever thoughts you have or questions, and then we'd ask you to move on and just to star as many thoughts as possible as well. Some great questions coming through. I do agree, Christina, you are wonderfully articulate.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm very passionate about the subject, so it just kind of pours out of me.
It does, and for those of us, or if you're still, I'm going to talk for a little minute, but we didn't really prepare too much because I knew that you had this knowledge, and it's nice to just do it in a more natural way as well.
Yeah, for sure. It's always an easy conversation between us. Okay, I think we're pretty good to kind of jump in now, Christina. It takes some time to field some of these questions. I'm going to go to the top thoughts report. We're just in our Discover dashboard here. This is how we analyze the data through Thoughtexchange. That's our thought graph. It shows everyone sharing thoughts and seeing the thoughts of others. And then, so we're going to go straight to our top thoughts report. And I'll just start going through these, Christina, with you, if that's okay. Sure.
So this is a great first question. Did you share the results of your media, and what was the reaction?
No, that's a great question. I think another component of leadership is that's really important is transparency. We work very hard to communicate with people frequently. The way that Lockhart ISD sees communication is that tell it first, tell the truth, and when you don't know, say so. In this case, we did the results of the school safety exchange. When we had the results, we actually were able to download a report of every single thought in order of the rank of agreement. And we shared it with all of our staff, all of our parents, and our community stakeholders. It was really important information. And what we know is if you ask people for feedback and you don't demonstrate A, that you received it, B, that you care about it enough to share it out, and C, communicate what you're going to do with it. If you don't do those things, people will stop participating, because then it's fake ownership. We're about real ownership. So yes, we did share.
I love that. A term we use a lot here is like closing the loop, but it's just that way of getting back to the community and actually sharing the results. And I think it's so important to do that too, Christina. And so I love this question too. What are some smaller ways that you ask questions at your district?
Okay, here's an example. This is just kind of something that I do every day. When I'm talking with other people that I'm working with or partnering with on an initiative, or if I'm meeting with my staff, one of the ways I always close a meeting with them, small or long meeting, it doesn't matter, is what can I do to help you today? Is there, what are the things that I can help you with immediately that can make a difference? I think that we need to see leadership as an opportunity to be of service to other people. And that gives people an opportunity to tell them what's on their mind. It gives, if there's something they're struggling with that day or that week, or they're overwhelmed by something, if they may not answer that question at first, which is what happened. I would ask that question and, oh, nothing, I'm great. But when they saw that I was going to ask that question every time, I started to get regular feedback. And what happened is that instead of feeling like they had to deal with problems on their own, they knew they could bring it forward, and we just, okay, let's brainstorm what we can do about this, and take immediate action. So I think, yes, you can ask questions of a larger audience on a larger issue, but on everyday things, just by simply asking people, what can I do to help you? When you're seeing somebody working on a process, well, what do you think is working well with this? And how can I help in this process? I think always tie it back to how we can serve them. Then they know that they can ask for help, and that it's okay to admit not having all the answers, and that we can work together.
I love that, Christina, and they're seeing that from you with your ability to ask the questions and show that you don't know all the answers, and then it gives them that opportunity to do the same. And I think we can all relate to that feeling of when you feel like you're overwhelmed, you're working a lot, having someone just ask you how you're doing, what your plan is, it can really help, because it's just like connecting with you in that way of, hey, I'm here for you, and I want to ask something about what you're working on because I care. And I think it's a wonderful way to do it. So this is a perfect question, because this is how we first met, and our very first call was about how you had gone and created a whole presentation on the difference between Thoughtexchange and other surveys, which it just blew my mind, and today still forms a template for every adoption implementation plan that I form with my partners that I work with. All came from your first presentation on this. So I'll let you talk to this for a moment, because it was incredible.
Sure. So I think that before you get people's buy-in, you have to explain the why behind something. And so when we were looking to use Thoughtexchange as a new tool, it was so very different than the traditional survey that most organizations turn to with the best intentions, right? And so when we were presenting to the leadership team to talk about Thoughtexchange and how we were going to do the school safety exchange to find out what people, thought was important, I wanted to first show them, give them an experience where they would see how surveys can be limiting. For example, I took a subject that I knew everybody cared about, and that's food. We're all very particular about what we like to eat. We all have our preferences and we all have our dislikes. So in this presentation, I said, well, before we start talking about school safety, I just want to let you know that the leadership team is going to be buying you dinner this evening. And we know that getting your feedback is really important in this decision to make dinner. So we're just going to take a quick survey and let you drive the decision on what we're having for dinner tonight. So I flashed this onto the screen, the question, what would you like for dinner tonight? And I think I said something like bison, jellyfish, haggis, and something else, sushi. And there were just 4 options. And everybody on the leadership team, and I did the same thing with the board, they looked at these options, they were just like, you know, like, oh no, I mean, but you get to weigh in, right? I mean, I'm getting your feedback. You know, it's really important to me that we get your buy-in on this. And so people answered, you know, and we got the collection, and I just looked at them and said, now, are any of you excited about the dinner that we're providing based on your feedback? And I got this loud resounding no. And I said, what was so, you know, tell me about that. Tell me why you're not happy about this. We asked for your feedback. Tell me more about that. And well, you only gave us these choices. And so I think that's it, right? I mean, with surveys can be limiting because it's just the questions that we ask with the answers that we provide for them to choose from. It's limiting in its very nature. It does provide feedback. It's just not organic feedback. And I think that as leaders, when we really care about getting to the heart of what people care about, we need to be open-ended. And so that's why Thoughtexchange was beautiful, because I said to them, now imagine if I instead asked, what are some of the things that you would like for dinner tonight? And then had a thought exchange that allowed them to tell me exactly what they wanted, and have a tool that would prioritize and allow them to weigh in on each other's choices so we could see really what was important to the group and to do it quickly. So this experience was really powerful for them, and it made it more palatable to transition to using Thoughtexchange to get feedback from folks, because they saw and experienced for themselves how a survey can be limiting. I think surveys can still be useful, but they can be limiting. And I think Thoughtexchange offers a way to capture that feedback in an efficient way.
That's awesome, Christina. And it's, you know, it kind of goes back to that Simon Sinek of like, you know, start with the why. Like, and I think that example that you ran with people really helped explain why they would use this. And like you said, both tools are, and multiple tools for feedback are really good in their own ways. But it's really nice when you can articulate why it's different and why you would go around this approach versus another approach. So there's a question here around, how do you think about designing and asking your questions through the platform? So what kind of, I guess, like for you as a leader, how do you come up with the question? Like, how do you then design that and then put that in the platform?
You know, and that's a really good question. I think that anytime that we're looking at an issue and we're trying to learn from it, that's something that we as a leadership team sit down and say, okay, what is it that we're trying, you know, what is it that we're trying to find out? You know, what is the opportunity we're trying to seize? What is the information we need to know to be able to do that? And so it's a bit of asking ourselves those questions and challenging each other to really kind of distill what is it that we're trying to get at, and then how can we get there? What kinds of ways? What open-ended questions can we ask to get there? And you know what? We're brainstorming this question. Now, it doesn't have to take, you know, a really long time to do that. But what it takes is thoughtful consideration of what you're trying to ask. And I think that as we've become more accustomed to using the tool and formulating those questions, we become a little more comfortable. But I think at the end of the day, it's about what is the opportunity we're trying to seize? What is the information that we need to have to make a better decision? Who are all the people that are impacted by this issue, so that we can make sure that every one of those people are part of that conversation? okay, so now what are we really trying to get at? So I think that's, I mean, I know that's not a precise answer, but that's the process that we use to formulate the questions that we ask. And like, once again, I think that anybody who's watching, if you will read that book, Leading with Questions, it gives you fantastic examples that have really helped me in trying to formulate those questions.
That's awesome, Christina. And we'll keep going. So surprising results other than, so you did the safety exchange and you got, like, it kind of went in a different direction to what might have been in the public, like in the newspapers, and everybody thought conversations were going to go a certain way, but they didn't. Have you had that experience in other questions or other ways that you've used Thoughtexchange, or even with your community in different ways?
Yeah, for sure. So another example I can think of is when the school district was working on considering the adoption of what we called an innovative academic calendar. And so what that meant was that there was a group working to see if changing the way we schedule for the school year would have a positive impact on our students. And we are a district of innovation. We have that state designation. And because we have that designation, we were able to be more flexible in our academic calendaring. So we were looking at taking 3 weeks from the summertime and folding that in throughout the school year to provide opportunities for our kiddos to have an enrichment or intervention just based on what their needs were. It was going to make the school year look a little different. It was a different concept. And while we felt that it would benefit our students to reduce the impact of what we know to be summer slide, we thought it was important to get feedback. And so when we took this out for a thought exchange, it was wonderful. Did we get the results about that showed that everybody was on board? No. What we saw was kind of a 50-50. Half the people who were supportive and maybe half who had concerns. But gosh, what a great opportunity, because what it did was it provided to us what the concerns were. And so if we go back to Carol Dweck and the power of not yet, we didn't see this as a no, we saw it as a not yet. And we took it as an opportunity to learn and to see where we could improve the possible adoption of the innovative academic calendar. And so, I mean, we're going to continue to study the possible adoption of this, because we do want to make sure that we're serving our kids, and trying to reduce the impact of summer slide and to provide them opportunities to thrive with enrichment. But because we did the thought exchange, we were able to find out what we still need to work on and who we need to involve in coming up with those solutions.
Yeah, and I kind of even like that example almost more, because it keeps the conversation going, but it just takes it a step forward. You didn't have a complete answer from it, but it opens up the conversation. It creates more of that shared ownership when the decision again, and it's like, and now the journey continues, and you try to work on that as best you can. And so a thought that came in and jumped to the top there was, and this one I think is super relevant, because I actually used your example a lot to help other districts achieve this. So the questions around using Thoughtexchange for professional development with teachers, and I know I can kind of answer a little bit about this, and then I'll get your opinion on it too, Christina. But what I find when we first got into this side of using Thoughtexchange and professional development side, we needed to really focus on the why, because we would get principals and teachers in a room and we would teach them how to use it, but they didn't quite understand why it was different. And then after having the conversations and building out a bit more of a plan with yourself, I was able to take that learning and really help with districts understand the why of using it in professional development circles. And then we've been able to create great traction with that some of our successes are like forming agendas for retreats, professional development retreats over the summer. And then we do it within the session. So if someone's presenting a session live in the room, we can do a thought exchange just like we're doing right now, and we can get the question answer session. And then it's great for key takeaways as well. So like when you finish off your retreat, you know, what are some of our key takeaways? What are some of the things we'd like to see improved for next year? And it's great because you get professional responses, but you also get like, we want better lunches, we want more breaks. You know, you get this a range of thoughts that come on the back side of just being more open-ended in your questioning around the professional development as well. And then I'll let you jump in. Is there, like, how have you found that at Lockhart ISD?
Oh, for sure. We're always looking for ways to use this tool. And I know that our Deputy Superintendent, Kim Brentz, used it along with Assistant Superintendent Stephanie Camarillo in the work that they recently did with principals. One of the things that we're looking at and studying very seriously is the issue of equity in school districts, equity in education. And what can we do to make sure that we're growing all of our learners with the same rigor, that the circumstances of our students don't dictate the kind of instruction that they receive from us, rather that we're growing every single person. You know, in our district, we aim to grow them 1.5 years in reading and math every year, whether they're a struggling learner or an advanced learner. So when you take on this kind of an ambitious goal, you really have to work hand in glove with your campus leadership, because they're the ones leading teachers, and the teachers are the ones that make it happen, right? And so recently, our Deputy Superintendent and Assistant Superintendent C&I wanted to do some professional development with principals about the difference between being schools in a district or a school district. Totally different concepts. And if we're going to tackle the issue of equity, we can't do it with the mindset that we're schools in a district, that we're just our own silos with our, you know, instead, we are Lockhart ISD. We are a school district committed to growing all learners. And that kind of a mindset changes the way you staff. It changes the way you schedule. It changes, you know, the performance measures that you choose. But we used Thoughtexchange to ask principals, in what ways are we supporting LISD to be a school district? I mean, a school district and not schools in a district. And so it really caused them to do that reflection.
I do love that, Christina, and we've come to the end of this, and I think that's a nice place to end it as well. Like, there's lots of discussion on equity around the country right now, and I think that kind of I love the way you put that, not being schools in a district, but being part of a school district. I think it's a wonderful way to conceptualize that point on equity. One small quick question I wanted to answer here was, do you think Thoughtexchange can be used in a classroom? And the answer is yes, we're doing it more and more. And you know, it's basically when a teacher's in the room and can guide the conversation. You know, we're learning that as we go, but that's another place that can be used for sure.
Colin, if I could just interject, our superintendent uses Thoughtexchange with the students on his Superintendent Student Advisory Council. Every time they have a meeting, they do a Thoughtexchange, so he can tune in to what's important to the students.
I love that. I love that too, because the student voice is so important as well, and it helps guide the conversation. So Christina, thank you very much for your time. That was amazing. And like I said at the start, we could probably sit and talk for the rest of the day. But one thing I wanted to bring to everyone's mind was Amelia posted in the chat a link to it's another Zoom meeting, and it's with our engagement coaches. And so if you have some further questions, or if you wanted to do a little bit of development on your own questions, if you're already a partner, jump in there and feel free to talk to those guys. But again, thank you very much, Christina. This has been awesome, and looking forward to chatting to you soon.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.
No worries. Bye-bye.
Bye.